What's going on, folks? Monday Night Football officially in the books, which means Week 10 has wrapped up. And as always, I have got my Week 11 waiver wire pickups for you. Get an early start to it. So let's get right into it and take a look at my top 10 ads for this week. Starting at the quarterback position, a guy that I want to mention is Joe Flacco of the Ravens. And obviously, the Ravens coming off a bye week, but they're going to go ahead and face the Packers at Green Bay. Tough venue, but nonetheless, the Packers are just not the same team without Rodgers, and they continue to have injuries on defense that are not helping their situation. And just look at the game this week versus the Bears. Trubisky probably had one of his best games as a pro, over 200 yards and a touchdown, and I definitely think Flacco will be able to duplicate that, if not better it. So for me, a pretty decent stream option this week. If you have Flacco and are in need of a quarterback, go ahead, pick him off waivers if that possibility is there. I think he can deliver some nice numbers versus the Packers. Next, a name at quarterback that probably won't be coming up too often, but nonetheless, I've got him here, Jay Cutler of the Dolphins. He's coming off a shellacking versus the Panthers, but nonetheless, came out with it with 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, did have an interception at the end of the second quarter when they were trying to move down the field, but still, a somewhat respectable stat line, and now the Dolphins are going to get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and to me, without Winston, this game is totally different atmosphere for the Bucs. They've got problems on the defense, and again, I think the absence of Winston is going to trickle down to the defense. They're going to get more and more tired, and I don't think that defense has been anything special all year. It's been able to be taken advantage of, and Paul Cutler is a very mistake-prone guy. He does do a good job of carrying out the football, and I do think with the recent emergence of Julius Thomas, this can be a good game where he takes a shot downfield and he hits on some of them to give you those big plays, and at the end a respectable stat line. Game where he takes a shot downfield and he hits on some of them to give you those big plays, and at the end a respectable stat line. Transitioning to the running back position, the first guy that I want to talk is Jamaal Williams of the Packers, and the simple reason being all the injuries that occurred to the Packers at the running back position yet again. Versus the Bears. We had Ty Montgomery go down and Aaron Jones both go down, which resulted in Williams getting a bulk of the carries for the rest of the game. He finished with 20 carries for 67 yards, and it's definitely looking like Jones won't be available. He had to be stretchered out, and Montgomery re-injuring those ribs. So I think it's safe to say Williams will be the next man up, and he'll handle the bulk of the carries versus the Ravens. I will say this, not a good matchup versus the Ravens, but I think the Packers are going to have to rely on him, and for the sheer fact of bulk usage, he is worth adding off of waivers. Most likely will be available, so go ahead, take a shot on him, probably flex appeal at best, and see what happens. Next, a name that's been gaining a lot of momentum in recent weeks because this guy is set to return from IR, none other than Danny Woodhead of the Ravens. And I will say this, in a year where the running back position has been so up and down, filled with injuries, he is definitely worth adding, especially if you in a PPR league. Won't hurt you too much, won't cost you too much if he is still available. Worth taking a shot on. And I know the Ravens offense isn't anything too amazing, but still, hopefully adding him back into the mix will be some kind of spark with his versatility, especially in the passing game too. Now, I do think he will get some carries, but Collins and Buck Allen have been filling in, so there is somewhat of a committee back there, but Woodhead was a free agent addition that was somewhat big for the Ravens, so I do think they will try and get him back into the offense pretty fast and try and get his usage up there. So if he's still available, go ahead, take a chance on him, especially PPR leagues. My final name to consider at the running back position for this week is Austin Ekeler of the Chargers. And look, this is maybe somewhat chasing points, but he still did have 10 carries and had 5 receptions for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's where a lot of the appeal comes in the receiving game for Ekeler. And I will say recently the Chargers have been splitting more and more carries between him and Gordon. I don't know if it's a situation where Gordon isn't 100%, so they want to kind of preserve him, but I will say especially for Melvin Gordon owners. Don't do yourself a disservice in case something happens with Gordon down the stretch and some kind of breaking news occur that, you know, he's going to miss some time or something like that. Obviously, this is just speculation, but go ahead, handcuff a guy like Ekeler, or if you can add him, I would say he doesn't have that much appeal long term, but for anyone that is, again, chasing points, especially at the running back position, try and move Ekeler. Definitely has more value in PPR leagues, and see what kind of value you can get for him. Now moving ahead to the wide receiver position, a guy that I want to start talking with is Marqise Lee of the Jaguars, and this week Jaguars are going to have a very friendly matchup versus the Browns, so can't really go wrong with any of their players in my opinion. I think they'll be set for a bounce back in terms of fantasy perspective, and with Lee, the reason that he gets a mention is because his production has been pretty solid the last couple of weeks, especially this last one. 6 receptions, 55 yards, and a touchdown. And on top of that, looking like Hearns might miss some time, so Lee becomes the main guy for that offense at the receiving game. Go ahead, pick him up again versus the Browns. Has a very nice positive matchup. I presume he will be the main guy for Blake Bortles in the passing game. Next, another name that's getting set to return from injury, and that is Coleman of the Browns. And I know what everyone's reaction might initially be. It's the Browns. How are you going to go ahead and take a chance on anyone in that offense? And I know it's definitely a risk, I will admit that, but the role that I kind of compare it to is the one that Sterling Shepard has on the Giants, being that main receiver that's pretty much the only guy there that targets are just going to find their way to. And I think Coleman is a similar situation. Obviously, Eli Manning better than Kaiser in my opinion, but nonetheless, I think Coleman will get his opportunities, a little bit of a boost in PPR leagues as far as I'm concerned. And we kind of saw the good performance from him early in the year, again with Deshaun Kaiser, so I think there is something to be said about potential there. And if you're in need of a flex guy, might be a decent option moving forward into the season. Moving on to the tight end position, 2 guys that have already kind of come up, but nonetheless, Julius Thomas of the Dolphins. His name was already mentioned, and I do think he has been playing quite nicely these last couple weeks. He's been finding ways to get in the end zone and establishing himself as a guy for Cutler to look to. And again, I think the matchup versus the Bucs is a friendly one. And he had 2 receptions, only 8 yards, but like I said, did find the end zone versus the Panthers. And if anything, I think he will be that red zone target for Cutler, especially if they can't rely on their running game. So I think Julius Thomas is worth, at least for this week, a decent add off of waivers at the tight end position if you need him. Next, another guy from the Jaguars, and that is Marcedes Lewis at the tight end position. Now, he did only come off of 2 catches for 29 yards versus the Chargers, but I will say I think the matchup this week is a very nice one and friendly one versus the Browns, and Lewis being the most veteran guy in the bunch as far as the pass catchers are concerned. I think the chemistry is there between Bortles and him. He's had some big games this year so far, and I think definitely if you're in need of a tight end this week, a guy that has a very high ceiling and a friendly matchup could work out in your favor. Now, going to the defenses, wouldn't be a true waiver video without these guys, so let's look at them. My top defenses for this week, starting with the Ravens versus the Green Bay Packers, and I actually think that the Ravens schedule moving down, as far as playoffs are concerned in fantasy, has a really nice appeal to it. So if they're available, especially since they're coming off a bye week, go ahead, try and add them. Versus the Green Bay Packers, so many injuries for the Packers, and I think that Ravens defense is stout. Even though this game is in Green Bay, I expect them to make it a long day for Huntley and for them to get at least a couple of turnovers and have the chance to score off of them. Next, a defense that again might have some nice appeal this week, Lions versus the Bears. And look, the Bears, their offense is very limited. There's no other way to put it. Trubisky, he's not getting all the opportunities that he needs to pass and to air it out. That running game, it gets negative runs so often if you look at Howard and Cohen. So there is a lot to be liked in terms of the matchup. I think all the Lions need to do, and I think they're aware of it, is not blitz, because when teams have been doing that against the Bears and kind of playing coverage in the back end of the defense, that's when the Bears with Trubisky have really struggled and have had trouble beating opposing defenses. So look for some kind of game plan of that accord, and I like the Lions defense to come somewhere around 10 points this week. And I like the Lions defense to come somewhere around 10 points this week. And finally, the last defense that I'm excited about is the Chiefs versus the Giants. And look, maybe the Chiefs defense not available in all leagues, but they've been somewhat of a letdown in recent weeks, so some owners might have gotten frustrated and let them go. So this week especially versus the Giants, I think this can be a very nice play. I fully expect the Chiefs offense to jump out to a lead, in a big lead versus the Giants, and that's going to force Eli Manning to air it out a lot. Now, I know that could present itself with a lot of big plays and things like that, but again, Andy Reid, this Chiefs defense, I think it's more disciplined than that. I think obviously some big plays will be allowed, but when it's all said and done, I think they'll be able to create turnovers off of Eli with the increased passing if they find themselves in a situation where they are trailing. So that brings a wrap to my top 10 guys to add this week for waivers. Now, let me know what you guys thought. Are there some names that I forgot? Some guys that you don't feel as high on? And if you have any questions, as always, hit me up in the comments section. I'll do my best to answer everything and anything. And if you enjoyed, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in future videos.